All right, welcome back from the break. Lucky enough, just before we were trying to call it a wrap on New Day, we had our guest step into the studios. We've got Philip Agbese, who is a researcher with the Global Human Rights Watch. I want to say welcome to New Day.
Thank you very much.
All right, you did, before we stepped into the studio, you did say you had written some, made some research as regards human rights in Nigeria. Could you just give us a tip of what were the highlights of that report?
Yes, our midterm report actually centered on the current administration, Nigeria going forward from 2015 to 2017.
Okay.
And some of the issues highlighted, the human rights issues that actually came up, were issues that have to do with the war against corruption,
Okay.
and the Nigerian government's fight against terrorism. And these are complex issues. And of course, because a couple of actors in this sector have actually made comments, without taking their time to really go into details, we took out time to actually go memory lane to look at the issues and equally look at rules and regulations, international conventions, and to place them side by side with what exactly the law says. And from our research, we actually realized that in some of the cases, the Nigerian state has actually been at par with the provisions of the law. For instance, one of the issues people really love to talk about in Nigeria while rating the current administration in the issue of detention.
Okay.
If you actually look at the detention of some of the actors, who are still in government custody, let's take the detection of Colonel Samboda Suki retired,
Okay.
for instance. His own case, if you look at it very well, has to do with national security issue. And
Okay.
if you look at it critically, where it is actually a complex issue, and I think the kind of funds, the money involved in that issue is actually what is making it difficult for the state to be able to, cause his release despite court orders and all of that. But I know that even in the face of the court orders, like people love to talk about, the last avenue, for judicial process in the case have equally not been exhausted. If you take the issue of the extremists,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
He actually, he has been in this game, of infringing on people's rights,
Okay.
and the security agencies not being able to intervene, in bringing his activities to a halt. But of course, there was an intelligence report,
All right.
which was later confirmed, after the confrontation his group had with the Nigerian army, that these persons were actually preparing. And with the large catcher of arms that was actually discovered, the bunker, the hospital,
Okay.
and all of that, you really discovered that people, before now had decided to even set up mini states, within the state. And these are issues that are not healthy for national security development. So we love people when they talk about human rights issues, especially when it has to do with detention. I think some persons are taking the safety of the over 180 million persons, for granted. For granted.
Okay, with what you said, does that mean that the report we got from Amnesty International, which placed the Nigerian Army and Nigerian police as being those abusing the rights of people, is totally out of place?
Yeah, we cannot completely exonerate the security agencies from
Okay.
abuse of rights and all of that, because of course we are still trying to migrate from a crude society to a level-headed society.
Okay.
But the issue cited by Amnesty International, take for instance the case of IPOB.
Okay.
The video clips that were shown were actually made up. One couldn't really tell. And there were even instances where the security agencies raised alarm that these guys were using sophisticated arms and weapons against them. And the job of Amnesty International is not a comprehensive NGO. It is actually one, that sees itself, it is one that fights state actors.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but for a holistic job to be done, that is why we have a group like the Global Amnesty Watch. We are a team of research, researchers in human rights law, and other legal issues. And we try to do a comprehensive thing. The comprehensive thing.
But what's the guarantee that your reports are always non-biased as
Yes,
in
that is why.
comparison
Yes,
to Amnesty International?
yes, no, that is why what we do at Global Amnesty Watch is to look at a comprehensive, a holistic issue.
Okay.
What Amnesty International does basically is to attack state actors.
Okay.
Amnesty International basically believe that that citizens' rights, should be protected, and to that extent, state actors, should not take actions. But what we do at Global Amnesty Watch is to equally look at the rights, rights of state actors
Okay.
and rights of the citizens.
All right.
Yes, and other issues in between. So if you look at it very well, when we are still working on our comprehensive report on IPOB and the issues
Okay.
in the Southeast. Yes, what we have done recently, what we released recently, like you saw on television,
Yeah.
was just our meeting report on the Nigerian government war against insurgency in the Northeast.
All right.
Yes, we still have other security issues, other issues that have to do with human rights that we're dealing
Okay.
with. But let me just give you a tip of what we have seen so
All
far.
right.
At the course of our discussion, at the course of our investigation and visit to the Southeast, we were in Onitsha,
All right.
and we went to Aba, and realized we actually drew the attention of state actors to the fact that there was a shrine owned by IPOB, where people of a particular ethnic group in this country were being killed, buried in shallow graves. Of course, you must have seen the pictures, about 39 persons,
Yeah.
who were murdered, by this IPOB. And if you look at what happened some days back, the IPOB sit-at-home protest, you also see that people were actually not that they wanted to observe the sit-at-home protest, but because of fear, force of coercion.
Okay.
People had to stay back home because these guys have recruited hoodlums, who go after people. And the security agency was even helpless. They couldn't intervene. They couldn't stop people because they've seen situations where security agencies would try to protect the larger population of the citizenry, and these organizations like Amnesty International and other local NGOs,
Yeah.
Who have taken side. For instance, what do you have to say about an organization like Huriwa? Huriwa is Human Rights Watch in Nigeria, Human Writers Association in Nigeria.
Okay.
And if you look at it, the complexion, the complexity of the characters that are behind it are ethnic, biased persons who cannot issue any report. So sometimes when they issue out their report, you begin to ask, is it a report to protect their ethnic group? Is it a report to protect their personal pocket interest? Is
Okay.
it also a report, to project and promote, personal gains and things like that? So if you take the case of IPOB, and you look at it critically, where you see that it is even the IPOB that has, continued to bully the Nigerian state. Because if you look at statements, how many citizens want to be called animals? A man, started a radio station where he virtually refers to everyone in this country as an animal. Who is an animal? You call a country, my own country, you call it a zoo. What makes it a zoo? So if you're in a zoo, not everyone is in a zoo. And if you want to live in a zoo, best for you to do, we have the Yakari Game Reserve and other places where animals are kept. So he could just simply move to that place. I think with that, no one is going to talk about rights and all of that. But a situation where, you demonize the rest of the 180 million persons' interest, I think it is wrong.
All right. Still, like you said, your research not just at the human rights. Do you have some research as regards the anti-corruption war?
Yes, we like the anti-corruption war. Okay, one of the issues we have been discussing, and one of the things that we saw, at the course of our research into the Northeast, the war against insurgency in the Northeast, we equally realized that corruption, it is something, that is endemic. It is something that has really, really hampered the growth and development of our society. And we realized that for every sector of the Nigerian state to be able to move forward, corruption must be stamped out. And that was what we saw in the case of the Nigerian military. Because virtually nothing can be done if corruption is there. So people talk about the gains, of the war against insurgency. They talk about the absence of bombings and all of that, the release of the girls. But people are not actually, they've not taken time, to really go down to understand the institutional changes, the institutional processes and the reforms that have taken place. For me, I believe that the institutional issues are the quick wins. They are the ideal development that have taken place because the level of sanity and transparency that exists in the Nigerian military, it is a clear evidence that we can actually defeat anything. Because where there is fairness, where there is accountability, where there is transparency, where there is probity, people would naturally, want to be patriotic. So what is going on in the Northeast, has to do with what has taken place at the headquarters of the Nigerian military, from the chief of defense staff, to the last soldier in this country.
But did you ever get to hear about the story that broke that the Nigerian army at a point wanted to build a golf course where it also urged some of the whole rank and file of the Nigerian army to make some bit of contributions in order to own this golf course?
Yes.
Did you ever hear that
yes,
story?
Yes, the issue was raised in one of our discussions.
Okay.
And we actually didn't just visit the Nigerian military, the Nigerian Army headquarters to find out. We interacted with the public relations officer, the director of Army Public Relations Unit, then Colonel Usman as he was. And we had a very robust discussion. And of course, as a watchdog, we went we went down, on the ground to interact with officers. And to a large extent, of course, some persons said it was not a compulsory issue, that it was going to be voluntary. And those who raised the issues were people who felt that, of course, if we do not participate in this voluntary issue, what might happen to us? So we're able to trash that out. But I think every society, every community, every organization, should be in a hurry to give to the Nigerian state.
Didn't you think that project in its totality was elitist based and wasn't what the true Nigerian soldier would need at that point in time?
No,
a golf course rather than not even very secure accommodation?
No, I think with due respect to the leadership of the Nigerian army and those at the helm of affairs, before somehow we are not seeing an army that is relating with the people, an army where everyone has virtually become equal in terms of commitment to the Nigerian state. This is now an army where, of course, we now see the chief of army staff at the battlefront leading. So I don't think that is elitist. But what I think, I basically what I would suggest is that every organization, should be in a hurry to give back to the people.
Okay.
Yes, let us not, hang all our hope, on what the state has to offer, but what we can as well, the token contributions, that we can always make. So I think in a situation like that, the officers should be more patriotic. They should be see more of service to the nation. Because if we are looking at what Nigeria is going to give to us, virtually everything, nothing will ever be enough. Like the interventions you guys are making here, what it means for you to, put up this organization and you run pro bono services for people, inviting people to come, air their views, talk to the people, inform Nigerians, and you straighten issues. It's patriotic. Who is going to pay you? Virtually, there's no amount of money that will be enough to do all of that. It is not even enough. Like people who do researches in the Northeast, we go down, you sacrifice your life and all of that. And I think that is a new, that is a new spirit that the Nigerian military, has won over the last 2 years, because we now see, a military that is more devoted, a military that is more dedicated to giving back to the people than, giving to itself. And that is the area where corruption comes in. The leadership before yesterday was interested in what the state has to offer. They were in a hurry to build, tents and houses and all of that. And you can hear the stories that are following today, that this monies were taken from the covers of government. But today we now have a patriotic military, people who may even end up, retiring without, some money going back home.
If you were to give a scorecard to this present government in terms of what they've done as in human rights and anti-corruption war in the last 2 years, what will be your scorecard for them?
Yes, you see, human rights is a process. Okay. It develops with every society as the society gets to move forward. It develops with the level of information. It develops with reforms. And, the law is also a dynamic process. It is changing. But I think with based on current international conventions, we will give it to them that, they've really tried, because one, corruption itself, is the greatest threat to humanity. Is the greatest threat to humanity. Corruption is the bane, is a bane of underdevelopment in any society. And you and I know what that does. In fact, corruption itself is the greatest threat to human rights. So for the government to be able to curb corruption to this extent, because to a large extent, forget about the stories we hear, the money's being recovered and all of that. Government has done so much. The EFCC,
Right.
the Nigerian government, they've done so much in terms of curbing systemic corruption. They have dealt with the root of corruption. So sometimes I tell people, people overblow the issue of funds recovery and all of that. But I think the actual thing that the EFCC has done that we are overlooking, one of the greatest achievements of this current administration that everyone is overlooking, is the fact that they've been able to tackle systemic corruption. Because
Right.
today, if you look at it, people can no longer take from government coffers the way they used to do in the past.
All right. Well, I think hopefully you have to join us probably tomorrow again because time is not really our friend, and because we have lots of issues we were supposed to have trashed out. But very happy you at least joined us. But I just want to see your final take before you leave. Looking at this present government, would you say Nigerians should hold forth to this government, support them, and probably listen less to Amnesty International?
You see, thank God, Nigerians have taken up, the challenge of international NGOs, making an attempt to rubbish their own country. It is something the Nigerian people have taken for themselves. If you look at the recent report by Transparency International or Amnesty International, even before the military, give their own side of the story, because of the level of transparency and accountability that exists within, the setup today, people are, abreast with facts and figures of happenings within this sector. So the Nigerian people, naturally came out on their own without anyone asking them to do, and they defended the integrity of this country. So I know very well that Nigerians have woken up to the challenges, that are facing them. And if you talk about the current administration, I would say that it is the best thing that
Then
has
what
happened.
of amnesty? Do we take whatever amnesty brings to us? Do we look at it with some bit of skepticism, or do we just
No,
take
no,
it
no.
at amnesty? Because before
No,
now,
not just. You see,
amnesty's
it's not just a bit.
comments are taken really in high esteem.
No, oh, no. You see, Amnesty International has exposed its game plan, and Amnesty
Well, what
International.
is its game plan?
Yes, the game plan of Amnesty International and other organizations is to undermine, the sovereignty of some nation states that are seen, to actually be making headway, in terms of international development. And if you look at it very well, let's take the Amnesty International, the last Amnesty International report that came
Okay.
up. It actually came up at a point that the Nigerian military was able to degrade Boko Haram, and they came up with these issues. And people were wondering if Amnesty International is actually out to defend the right of the terrorists, or is to defend the right of the citizenry, or is to defend the right of the state. But I think that an organization that mean well should not even defend the state. It should not defend terrorists, but defend the people. In this case, the Nigerian military is defending the people.
But I thought the issue they raised was the fact that wrong missile that was fired into the IDP camp that had civilians killed in the IDP camp. I thought that was where one of the strong allegations were.
No, you see, we also read after that time that it was as a result of misreading of the map
On whose part now?
on the part of the Nigerian Air Force.
Because we heard that they took directives from an outside source.
No, it's not true. It's not true. You see, sometimes we just have to be fair, to these guys who are in uniform.
All right.
Because as we are here this morning, Abuja is what it is today now because, these guys are there. And
Okay.
they've been able to do a lot in terms of fighting terrorism. And in fighting terrorism, they do with their lives.
Okay.
That we must always, take in mind. They fight terrorism with their own lives. There's no amount of weaponry that is enough for anyone to fight terrorism. They do this with their lives. And if you look at that mishap, have we also forgotten that there was a time that, the terrorists brought down the Nigerian aircraft, the pilot was slaughtered, and all the gory things that have happened to the military, and how many persons, they've lost and all of that. So I think that the patriotism that the military have shown so far, they will not at any point deliberately, And you see, when it happened, what was the response of the Nigerian military? An inquiry was immediately instituted to find out the remote cause. So to a large extent, they demonstrated their level of patriotism despite the mishap that they are still for the people. I don't think a military that is committed to defending the people will turn after the people. I think for the first time, we are having a military for the Nigerian people in a democracy.
All right, I want to say a big thank you to Philip Agbese, who is a researcher with the Global Human Rights Watch. I hope he's promising us today that he's going to be with us on Monday so that we can actually trash out some other very pertinent issues, which is of national and global concern. I want to say thank you for joining me on today. And sorry, we know you had a long way trying to get to the studio,
No,
sir,
it's
but
fine, it's fine,
hopefully
it's fine.
on Monday we'll have you join us
My
by
pleasure.
8 so that we can actually really trash out some other very pertinent issues. All right, we'll be going for another quick break. When we come back, we've got another, got a barrister in the building who is going to be joining us on the other next program, talking about press review. But when